We are so honored to be hosting Nghi Vo for her new novel, The Chosen and Beautiful. Am I holding this up correctly? I have my copy, which is, by the way, signed by the author. It's not too late to get your book personalized too, because we'll be getting a few books personalized on Wednesday. The book is, I was going to say that I read it basically in one sitting for hours and hours. I couldn't do anything else. This take on this magical Asian queer take on The Great Gatsby has been winning raves all around, including, for example, this delightful review from Jessica P. Wick on the NPR website. One expects to find novels like this on the shelves of a dream library where all the great books that were never written reside, attempting what could have been but wasn't. Fortunately for us, The Chosen and the Beautiful exists, a vibrant and queer reinvention of S. Scott Fitzgerald's Jazz Age classic, The Great Gatsby, only this time we watch the tragedy unspool from Jordan Baker's perspective. Gatsby has literally sold his soul, and the speakeasy crowd occasionally adds a drop of demon's blood, demoniac, to their cocktails in order to really get a kick. I was captivated from the first sentence, and reading this book, now I know when I see the people around with a black nail, now I know what's going on. Nghi Vo is the author of the acclaimed novellas When the Tiger Came Down from the Mountain and The Empress of Salt and Fortune, a Hugo, Locus, and Ignite Award finalist, and winner of Reddit's Stabby and IAFA Crawford Award. Born in Illinois, she now lives in Milwaukee. We are so excited tonight to have me in conversation with Adrian Self, the novelist and cartoonist who I have just learned is blowing up on Tumblr. She's the author of 3 novels, including the forthcoming End of the World House, plus 2018's Invitation to a Bonfire, and The Daughters, which won the 2015 Penn Southwest Book Award for Fiction and was named Best Book of the Year by NPR. She's also published a collection of comics called Apocalypse How, an existential bestiary. I'll have more information in the chat. And don't you forget that you can ask your questions in chat or Q&A, whichever you like. It's supposed to be Q&A, but everyone asks in the chat anyway. So, and there's nothing I can do. I can't control the world. So please welcome Nghi Vo and Adrian Self. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a Best Book of the Year by NPR, not the Best Book of the Year, just to keep my humility in check. I'm so excited to be here to talk with Nghi. This is my copy of the book that I finished rereading today. You can see that I don't have like the good sticky tabs, so I made my own. But it's everything you've heard is true. For anyone who has not read this book, I read it to blurb it, and then I got to reread it again now, and I only enjoyed it more the second time. It's absolutely intoxicating from the very, very beginning. And that's kind of, it's sort of a joke to say that because they are literally intoxicated at the very beginning, but it transfers to the reader. So I'm really excited to talk to Nghi, and I have a bunch of questions. We can take your questions too. And I just hope we can make this free flowy and fun.
Yeah, we'll go, sure.
All right. So the first thing I'd love to hear you talk about is what drew you specifically to this story as a vehicle for these ideas, and how did you feel as you were writing it? Like, what was your experience of writing the book? And I ask this partially because Invitation to a Bonfire, my second novel, is inspired by the life of Nabokov. And a lot of people asked me when it came out, like, weren't you super intimidated to write that because Nabokov is famous, and indeed F. Scott Fitzgerald, some say, also famous. But I totally wasn't, because the story just really grabbed me from the beginning, and I felt the same. This book is so assured, so just propulsive and gorgeous that I suspected you might have felt the same way.
I think the fact that in a lot of ways I felt that The Great Gatsby was sort of given to me. I'm an American student. I went to a public high school, and The Great Gatsby is on the roster every single year. Most of us had to read it. Most of us managed to read it. And as a part of the American canon, it feels like it feels like a gift. I had that going for me. The fact that, it's here. This will make you. I don't know what the goal of that type of education is. I've gone back and forth with myself over what they're trying to do when they give us Nathaniel Hawthorne and what they're trying to do when they give us Edith Wharton. And I mean, I'm not sure what lesson we're supposed to take from F. Scott Fitzgerald, except for maybe mind your money a little bit better. But it felt like a gift. So if it's a real gift, that means that no one should really mind what I do with it. And that I understand where people might think that sounds arrogant, but I also went through the American public school system. So, it's, and I mean, the feeling I took from it was, well, this is mine now. This is very much mine now. And on top of that, there was just the wonder of the 20s, which is, I think, something that you went into in Invitation to a Bonfire as well. And there's just that intoxicating sense of plunging into the 20s as we go into our own 20s. And I think we've both grappled with, were they happier than we were? And the answer is probably no.
Probably not.
Probably not, no.
Yeah. And I love that. And it's so much of the history of art, isn't it? And of literature generally, like storytelling, everyone is stealing everyone else's stories and redigesting them. And nobody's ever going to present the same story the same way, which is, what makes this so incredibly original feeling. It's funny, as I was reading, I was definitely pulled back to high school when I was reading The Great Gatsby, and we all dressed up as Gatsby characters.
Rated the Goodwill.
Well, we stole them from the theater room, but
that's even better. That's even better.
Yeah, but it's a funny feeling of being tugged to your experience of Gatsby, but it's also so entirely its own creation. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that there is so much magic interwoven into this book. And I wondered if you could talk about whether you had a strategy for, or just like what your feelings are about the balance between magic and the real world here. Because it's inserted so coolly. So often world building in fantasy novels, or like fantasy inflected novels even, is really showy. And I don't even mean that as an insult. It's just like, that's really hard. So people spend a lot of time letting you soak it in. But here I feel like it's just there. It's part of the air they breathe, and it feels so natural. Like, as I said in the beginning, Jordan Baker and Daisy are like floating because they've taken a charm, and they just seem high, and they're literally high off the ground.
It's like a fun souvenir Daisy picked up while she was in Greece a while back. It's very fashionable. It's very fun. It's very, summery.
And it feels as completely normal as the idea of Jay Gatsby going to a queer underground like speakeasy. Both of those things, I was just like, yeah, this would have happened. So like I felt like there's this temptation with something that feels like such a natural fit for the world to read it as a pure metaphor, like, oh, the charms are drugs, or what are my examples? Like Gatsby selling his soul is Gatsby, working with the underworld, or it's all social influence, or it's class. But the thing that I find so like beautiful about the way that you did it is that those elements, the things that feel metaphorical, are also embedded into a world that's very real, where the like seemingly metaphorical elements are also real, is what I mean. So like, is a finance bro literally selling his soul? Like, is it a metaphor for a finance bro when finance bros who have not sold their soul are also in the same world? So how did you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's funny that you bring this up, because I was actually, like I said, I was flipping through your comics. I don't read them as they come out. I kind of do them in chunks. And one of the things is, it finally occurred to me, I'm like, these animals talk, and I have never questioned that. And I was fine with that. And I think that's part of the fun of writing spec fic and fantasy. I mean, apparently I'm getting crossed over with lit fic a lot with this one, which I didn't see coming in, perhaps should have. But there's this wonderful thing you can do as a spec fic writer where you're just saying, come with me for a few hours, and let me see what I can show you. And it's great. And if I can maintain that illusion, people will follow me and I can do almost anything I want as long as I'm consistent.
Mhm.
I did build with some care in mind. There is a magic system and there is a logic to it. But I learned very early on that Jordan does not give a good goddamn about any of it. Like, I got to know her very well. She is in her early 20s. She knows what she likes and she does not care. So
Uh-huh.
I had to build very concretely. I had to build concretely enough that the novel would hold up and I would hold up and I would be pleased with the result. But it had to be solid enough that it lives in Jordan's periphery and it is just the backdrop. It is no more, it is exactly as interesting to her as electricity is, which, as I was doing my research for the 1920s, the advent of electricity in the United States must have been like magic. It must have been a sudden flood of light against the darkness. It must have been this wonder that you find in the cities, the evil, wicked, worldly cities, and you still have farmsteads and whole towns off the grid, kerosene lights, wood stoves, and you move from one to the other, and that has to be magic. That has to feel like magic. And I was thinking that if I stayed along that, if I use that as a guide, if the magic lived in the space that electricity lived for people in the 1920s, and to some extent to the way that it lives for us now. Like, every time that there's a power outage or something, I'm usually a little bit like, oh, I guess we're back in the dark, and I have my candle, and I get, okay, who wants to tell fortunes with wax? I guess this is how we have fun now.
Mhm.
So for me, that was part of it. And the 1920s are just this wonderful division between, the trauma of World War I, the trauma of the Spanish flu, and the 19th century in general, which might as well be a different world. Might as well be, the 20th century might as well have been fairyland to the people who were living in the 1800s.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I built from there.
Yeah, I love that. I love the shout out to electricity in particular, not only because I'm very inclined to view, like, I'm very pro science. I love science. It fascinates me, but I also, there's part of me that's like, it's just magic. We call different stuff. We just have a different name for magic now. And that the example of electricity comes up in the book, and which made me think of it, especially as you're talking about it now, of Downton Abbey too, when they get a telephone or like electric lights in the house and all of the servants are like,
Do
no.
the kitchens need electricity? Surely not. Not the
Surely
cooks,
not.
right? Surely not.
We've been using candles for so long. You really don't need to bother.
Yeah,
Um,
what kind of silliness is this? It's a passing fad. It'll be gone in a week.
mhm. And we hear things like that and we think we're above it, but we would be the same. Like, we're the same way anytime a new technology comes out. It seems a little
Every
gauche
single
at
time,
first.
every single
Yeah.
time. Because I'm gonna be 40 this year, and when I was a teenager, it was one of those things where cell phones were for emergencies, and they were bricks, and then they became little flip phones, and
Mhm.
suddenly I have it's like all of my cat memes live here. What will I do without them?
Oh yeah, but I'm 37, and when I was in middle school, I think my dad
Mhm.
got a car phone, and it literally lived in a
But
briefcase.
it was magic. But they were
It was
suddenly, it's
incredible.
like you could talk to him while he was on the road.
Mhm.
How is that not magic? And how is that not wonderful and also a little terrifying?
I don't know. I also think that the way that the magic in the book is wonderful in the way that you use it, because it's not only world building, it's also extremely character revealing. So like Jay Gatsby, I was rereading the scene in
Cendrillon, yeah.
Cendrillon, which is one of the queer underground speakeasies, which are like wonderful and delightful, and I want to go to them so badly. Um, Jordan is there, and she gets kind of hijacked by Gatsby, who wants to convince her to do
What's
his
a
bidding.
word? Yeah.
Yeah. And in that scene, Jordan is incredibly astute, and she often sees through things. She doesn't always use the information that she has, but you can feel her seeing things. And through her, we're able to see an element of Jay Gatsby's character, which is totally present in The Great Gatsby too, where he's like sort of gauche, new money, really try hard. But it's so revealing to see it through him literally casting spells and, like, drawing Jordan Baker even Jordan Baker, who is like so saucy and so like aware of herself. And so anyway, I thought that was fantastic. And it makes me think, okay, sorry, I haven't talked to people in so long.
Oh no, it's fine.
I have all of my
This is making, when you brought that up though, it is making me remember all the times I've ever judged people who use their phones when they shouldn't be using their phones, you know? And I'm like, wow, that is our relationship to technology is character revealing as well.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a wedding, you put your phone away. Pure judgment.
Yeah, it gives there's always new opportunities for judgment. So I wanted to talk about themes of observation and secrecy, or like public identity and hidden identity, or it's like submerged identity, and which are like have so much fresh air in this book. And Jordan especially has so many layers, and some of them are secret even from Jordan at times, which makes her feel so incredibly rich. But that also makes her this superb observer. Like there's this tossed off memory that Jordan has about these two boys who go to war, brothers who go to war, and only one of them comes back, but she is able to see in his eyes. And I hope this isn't a spoiler, because it's really a toss. It's like it's a casual,
that's a throwaway, yeah.
She just like glances at the brother who comes back from war and is able to see immediately that he contains someone who is not him behind the eyes. And she's like, oh, it's actually his shittier brother. And she just crosses the street to be polite because she doesn't want him to know that she knows. And she's the same way about a lot of things, but then there are things about Nick and things about her feelings for Daisy that she does not reveal to herself. And including her magical abilities, which are not clear to her at first or known to her at first. So what was my actual question with this? I don't know if I have one so much as I just wanted to hear through that, maybe like how that led to a genesis of Jordan's character especially, and how she's embedded in the particular social world that she comes up in, which is so full of like persona.
So I'm working on this theory that when it comes to The Great Gatsby, if it gets its hooks in you as a teenager, one of the reasons it manages to do so is it is so full of big, unacceptable, overwhelming feelings. Like, you know, it is, I mean, I'm not going to question anyone who says it's rich people behaving badly, because it is, but it's also, you know, it's desire, it's ambition, it's, you know, the darker emotions that get a workout. And when you're a teenager, that's what it feels like. It feels like everything is so big and so overwhelming. And absolutely, I would have had a teenage summer that had, you know, 2 dead and people fleeing the country. I absolutely would have. And what it comes down to, I think, for that is how intensely observant we are as teenagers and in our early 20s. We are looking around and we are trying to be adults so hard. And we are adults. At the age of 18, you're an adult. You could be paying your own rent. You could be paying your parents' rent. But there is a certain level of experience that isn't there yet, even if you know it intellectually. You don't really know it in your heart or in your instinct yet. That needs a while to develop. And I think that's where Jordan comes from, with both her position as someone who observes and someone who is observed in turn, which Jay actually is someone who does observe her more in some ways than I think Nick does even.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of where that comes from. But everything is, you know, in the tradition of The Great Gatsby, is turned up to 11. You know, right. It's you got Jordan, and she is working so hard as a marginalized person to present the person that she wants to be to the world. Whether that's the person she really is, whether that's the person she really wants to be. Another question that a lot of non-white youth have, a lot of things that queer youth deals with. It's the question of, who am I? Who do you see me as, but on steroids, you know? And then you throw in magic and deals with the devil, and everything just gets even worse. Things are even harder.
Shocking.
Who knew? Deals with the devil did not actually make my life easier.
When you drink a lot of demon blood, you get high, but sometimes in a bad way.
Who knew that my actions would have consequences?
Yeah. I just came to a page that has 3 of my throwaway joke notes, which I took very seriously, but one of them is Daisy ace, or is she just an asshole?
Come on, you've been to that you've been to that meeting and wondered that. You've met those people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then for anyone who ever read Kate Beaton's Hark a Vagrant comics, she
Yes.
does wonderful like riffs on history and literary history, and her Great Gatsby one has a great moment where Daisy is talking to Jordan or Gatsby or someone, and she's literally sitting on her baby and says, "What baby?" And page 136, I wrote in the margins, "What baby?"
You know, I am really hoping. So I got to write the reader's guide for The Chosen and the Beautiful, and that comic is listed as a resource. I think that's
as it
essential
should
reading.
be.
Yes, that is essential reading for anyone who wants a modern take on The Great Gatsby. That's where we come from. That's part of where Chosen comes from.
I love that.
But no, there's that's one thing I try to get across about Daisy, the fact that Daisy is damaged. Daisy has had a great deal of difficulty in her life that is actually canon to the original in many cases, which startled the hell out of me when I did the research. But Daisy is also deeply dangerous. She is dangerous to the people around her. She is dangerous to the people far away from her and the people who are close to her. And that's something that Jordan figures out by the end, but it takes her years to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's both of those things. She's deeply traumatized and she is dangerous.
That leads me very nicely to my next question, although I will say that my last stray joke note was just so much biting, in parentheses, vampires, question mark?
Someone's going to do Gatsby as a vampire, and I want to be there for that.
Yeah. Okay, so the question, what you were saying about Daisy and how she, the combination of her innocence and her venom, I started writing a question about being interested in the genesis of the Manchester Act, which in the book is basically both a racist and an anti-demon law that is being in the process of being passed, like anti-immigration law. But that led me to a slightly more interesting question in terms of the way that racism, race, magic, demons, etc., are expressed in the book, which is hell actually bad here? Because there's plenty of non-hell magic that happens, and a lot of that magic tends to be happening in the experience, or like through the skill of non-white people. And like, is Gatsby's literal soullessness worse than, or even in some sense more literal than, Daisy and Tom's soullessness? So I guess my question is hell a literal reality here, or is it kind of a lie or a reality that white people have created?
I'm not that smart. No, what it comes right down to is that hell is real, demons are real, magic is real. And much like in the real world, hell is something we make for ourselves. And I'm not quite willing to go completely on board with Shakespeare's, nothing good or bad except thinking makes it so. Mm-hmm. But there is something to that. People who sold their souls, they're in a special place anyway. Why do you sell your soul? Oftentimes not for great reasons. Often, especially not with the deals that hell makes. Okay, I can't actually say that one. That one's actually a literal spoiler. But the idea of hell is the idea of the profound other. Let's put it that way. The Manchester Act has its roots in the Anti-Immigration Acts of 1922 and a few years earlier, I believe 1919 maybe. And those were anti-immigration acts that limited the entrance of Asian people into the United States. Technically, it was just an act about immigration, but much like the immigration debates today, it was an act of targeting. It told everyone who was a ready target and who would not be protected. And Jordan, because she is rich, because she rolls with a very wealthy crowd, and because she gets away with a lot of things that other people like her don't, manages to ignore most of it until the end. She manages to have a very good time. And then you meet the paper cutting troupe, and they've had a much worse time over the last 10 years than she's had, you know? And they're like, what's this chick doing?
This chick is dangerous.
And yeah, just like Daisy is dangerous for similar reasons, Jordan's dangerous, and I think the paper cutting troupe, by especially, picks up on that.
Yeah, and you see another way in which desire itself is such an intoxication for all of these people, and it will lead them to all kinds of dangerous choices. And I don't want to talk about it because I think it's scary and beautiful when you read it in the book in context, but there are some choices that Jordan and Daisy make together, and like discoveries they make together, that are pretty dark, and not just in the context of the Gatsby story that is known, but that are sort of revelations of this novel, and freaked the hell out of me.
There is this kind of darkness, I feel, that comes around from slumber parties, you know? Yeah, it's 4 a.m. Everyone, you're 14 years old. Everyone's been awake far longer than they should have been, and suddenly someone just says something that feels like it could spill right out of an oracle's mouth from ancient Greece. And I think that is sort of the core of the Daisy Jordan relationship. It's things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. I also wrote something about the irony of rich capitalists frowning on giving rights to paper in Vietnam when they are rich capitalists, and also something else, which is a spoiler, which I won't read. But let's talk a little bit more about the paper cutters. And also, we would love to take questions from the audience in whatever form. It looks like news editor popping in.
Oh my God, hi Diana.
Oh, yay. Oh, popping in to once again rep the Kate Beaton references, cocktail recipes and essays on Asian Americans in the Jazz Age and paper cutting in the book club guide, which Nghi wrote. So
actually, Diana needs to take responsibility for all of the drink recipes. I'm genuinely bad at alcohol, and she stepped right up and got all of those drinks tested for us. It was awesome.
That's fantastic. I'm going to have to try those out.
There are some mocktails too for anyone who doesn't do the alcohol bit. So those are pretty delicious. There's ginger water in there, among others, I think.
And where do you suggest getting demon blood from?
I suggest hunting. I mean, we're in Wisconsin up here, so hunting season's coming up in just a few months. So, just get to know someone in the North Woods. It'll be fine.
Sounds good. All right. So one of the paper cutters at one point, when Jordan meets this troupe of paper cutters who have had, like you say, a much rougher time, and they sort of give her a beautifully rough time. He makes a paper flower for Jordan, which becomes in the way that paper objects made by these paper cutters do, sort of a real flower, and she is questioning its reality and says, and Kai, the paper cutter, says it's just real and it's made of paper. And I think that really called back to me again to this notion that metaphor and reality bleed into one another. And depending on what it is that you want to believe, and the same can be true for lies and reality in the world of this book. But I was interested that you said that you quoted Shakespeare about the nature of reality and the mind, because what it actually made me think of, I was just reading a review in the New Yorker of Proust, or I mean, I guess not a review because we're aware of Proust. But one of the qualities that was highlighted in that review was Proust's essentially belief, or the statement made by the books essentially, that we don't live in the world, we live in the mind. And that it feels connected to me. So is anything in these books more real or less real, or do we just convince ourselves one way or the other? And that could also just be a philosophical question if you want to solve the world.
Give that a shot. All right. I am many years out of school, but I will give it my best shot. On one hand, I love the idea of living in the mind. I'm a writer, of course I live in my mind. Things that aren't in my mind feel like an intrusion, but on the other hand, someone punches you in the face and you start to feel the world becomes very real very fast. And that's a reality that I think the paper cutting troupe, Kai, by their friends, don't have, that Jordan doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan has suffered a lot of the humiliations and the embarrassments and the sheer awkwardness of being the only Asian woman in a group of privileged white people. And that's not without a price, but the price that people like Kai or Bai pay is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
There's this biological concept. When in doubt, just go back to biology, because it's like the nematodes have got you. They really do. It's the idea that two organisms can live in the same environment, but find them to be entirely different experiences, where something is perfectly comfortable, something else is dying under the pressure, where something is burning up, something else is utterly in its temperate zone,
Yeah.
And I think if I was trying to open up anything, it was that idea. It is one world, it is many worlds, it is the America we live in, as a matter of fact. It is, one America, several Americas. And I was just having this conversation the other day, and I don't know if I believe in unity. I don't know if I believe in a perfect whole. I certainly don't believe in it for myself. I have become very comfortable with a fragmented sort of existence, so many pieces of identity and belief, some which sit very uncomfortably with one another. And what it comes down to is the idea of finding a piece in the fragments, of making sure the fragments don't break each other. And maybe that's all we need to be happy, but it's a working theory. We're coming around.
Yeah, I like that, and it shows also how much human beings are intensely individual and also intensely individual works in progress. Because I don't know, I've been thinking as I get older, I'm newly aware of how much of my worldview comes from my childhood. And that's sort of a truism that you're told throughout your life. You're aware that you're like, oh, I was influenced in my childhood, and that's how I became who I am. And you rebel against it as a teenager, and then you get older and you start to integrate that idea into yourself. And it is and isn't true. Like, you can fight against it and so on and so forth. But what's interesting to me about it is that how much it means people are different and the same. Like, some of us have really, really different influences in our childhood that will stick with us in terms of our essential worldview for the rest of our lives. But we're all, like, everybody was raised in a different family, in a different household, in a different set of circumstances. And we're all going to react to those circumstances differently, to the world differently, and to our own reactions differently.
And we become so much happier when we learn how to accept those disparate pieces of ourselves.
Yeah.
The ones that I feel like everyone enters adulthood with an idea of who they are. And we don't like change. I think as humans, we're reluctant, especially the older we get, and hopefully the more comfortable we get. But there's a real sort of distress that comes with needing to integrate a fragment that you don't recognize into yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also some sort of there's a great deal of benefit to realizing that at any point those pieces will show up, and figuring out how to integrate them.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience. Lynn Haggerty asks, do you identify with any characters in either the Fitzgerald book or your own book? And if so, are they the same character?
I think half the reason that Chosen and Beautiful was written is because, except for that enormity of emotion, I don't really think I saw myself in The Great Gatsby. And I think the easiest thing to say for The Chosen and the Beautiful would be to say that I empathize with Jordan, or that I see myself in Jordan. And the answer is no, I don't. I do not like parties that much. I am so bad at parties. Like, people have been very kind, and they have said, you talk about parties so well. And I'm like, the only way you can talk about parties that well is if you kind of hate them a little bit,
You can pick them apart.
I think if I associate with anyone, it's possibly, keep an eye on the character Bai. She's so irritated all the time. So let's and she's like, why is this happening to me? This is my night off, so maybe keep an eye on Bai, maybe. But no, I love Jordan. Jordan is some impulses and some instincts I have turned up to about 20, and then just sort of unleashed with a lot more money and beauty than I have ever had. You
So
know,
much money.
yes, she's so rich. Everyone, please, please, if you take nothing away from this talk, she is so freaking rich. Um,
Yeah.
you know, she's actually living like the real influencer life, not the carefully constructed pictures put together by people who are very skilled with photography. She actually is living that life. That's the thing that's happening.
Yeah. The party scenes really are unparalleled. I did find myself tricked by your beautiful writing into wanting to go to a party, but only in the large party sense, because I just, it's like wanting to walk around a big city. I live in Tucson, so, you know, there's a city, but it's not New York.
You want to spectate. We want to see what's going on.
Yeah,
And then we want to
want to be
leave easily.
flaneurs. Yeah, it's just like the idea of loneliness in a crowd was after a year and change of a pandemic has really, I was like, yes, okay, and hell is giving me perfect cocktails. That sounds fantastic.
Do you remember though when every party seemed to end with someone crying on the steps?
Oh
And
yeah. Do I
yeah,
remember when? Like always?
I mean, last Friday, come on, it's been, you know, we're back at it, right? But there is this, I mean, Jordan's not wrong. One of the best lines in The Great Gatsby, and there's some amazing ones, are, you know, I like large parties so much, they're so intimate. And she's not wrong. There is a certain intimacy in being a face in the crowd and doing what I normally do, which is show up, find like the one person I find tolerable and leave with them. You know, that's been my party MO since I was 20. It's a good strategy, so I'm just gonna highly recommend that one. But you know, I mean, parties, even I think in our world, it's a different country, especially something I felt after the pandemic. There's, you know, the rules are different, the people are different, sometimes you're different, and that's natural and it's wonderful. And then you want to go home, or at least I do.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I usually want to go to home pretty quickly, even though I fetishize it from a distance.
I'm glad to have gone, I think.
Yeah, it's like having written.
Yeah. Oh, my book's done. Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
I'm amazing. And then during it, it's like I have all the structural integrity of mashed potatoes while I'm writing. So
Yeah, there's a lot of lying on the floor that happens over here. Okay, so I have one more question for you that is and then would be happy to take more questions from the audience, or else we can just peace out because we're just coming up on 45 minutes, which I think was our vague time goal. But we can go over if we want to, which is, did you have fun with the level at which Jordan is self-protective versus mean? Because she has this tendency to blame her meanness on just like lots of outside things. Like New York has made me mean, demonic makes me mean, but those things seem like covers, and like part of her complexity is that meanness seems, on the one hand it's self-protective, and on the other hand it's just like a little bit of her intuitive bitchy party girl like self just coming out. And especially with Nick, there's this real push-pull between her meanness and her tenderness, which partially seems to come from just like the way in which they are attracted to and a mismatch for one another. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that, like meanness versus self-protectiveness, meanness versus tenderness.
it's all her. At the end of the day, it is all her. Meanness is it's a protection. It's fashionable. She's, you know, she's not only is she mean, she's funny mean, which is I think like the worst kind, when not only is someone laughing at you, they've gotten everyone else to laugh at you.
And they
And
looked
Jordan,
good doing it.
and she looks good doing it. And how unforgivable is that in some ways, you know? Part of it is the fact that it's you're right, it's protective. If people are laughing at someone else, they're not laughing at her. And that's, I think everyone has to find out how forgivable they find that. It's, as I get older, I find it to be less forgivable, even if it is unfortunately understandable. But some of it is the fact that she is just mean. She likes having her good time, and to a certain extent, she doesn't care who else is having a good time. She would like it if they did. But part of it is also because one thing that doesn't ever seem to come across anytime I read The Great Gatsby is how young she and Daisy are. They're easily 10 years younger than Nick and Gatsby, which um, it's something that would not necessarily raise eyebrows then, but if I was in college and one of my friends had taken up with a 28-year-old guy, I'm going to have something to say about that. There is Jordan, most charitably, if we're going to be kind to her, which she doesn't always deserve, she's growing up. She's growing up in front of our eyes, in front of the book. And at the end, she has become aware of how much more she needs to grow, just not only to be self-actualized, but how much more she needs to grow up just to survive the world she's living in. And that's sobering and it's dark, but I think inevitably it will be a triumph. She's pretty confident about it. And once again, she's in a safe place to explore and be who she really is, thanks to the money, but also thanks to the fact that she's actually pretty tough herself. So
Yeah.
she's got that going for her.
Yeah, there's a beautiful, subtle retrospective quality to Jordan's narration, because it feels really alive in the moment, but it is also speaking from a slight distance, and it makes me feel like she's going to be okay.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Me too. Okay. If we don't have any more questions, I think we were supposed to call back. There we are. Oh, you're on mute. So I'm going to take the opportunity to speak over you and say, this has been so delightful, Nghi. I'm so happy I got the opportunity to talk with you about this book. It's just
I actually nearly started crying when you blurred my book. I hope you know that.
I'm so happy to hear that. I loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad. No, I think that was one of the first ones Diana sent to me, and I was just so thrilled.
I'm more than happy to do it.
Well, we could listen to you talk for another half hour, maybe another hour. So, what, as somebody said, one of the best moderators she's heard in a long time.
Oh, thank you.
No, you're awesome at it. Yeah.
I love asking smart questions of smart people about smart books.